As Americans, we have a constitutional right to have a lawyer help us out, even if we can't afford it, if we are arrested. In Louisiana, the law says you should get counsel within 72 hours. But they don't really fund a public defender program. Before Katrina, about 3/4 of the public defender's office budget came from people paying traffic tickets and other fines. Since there weren't a lot of traffic tickets getting paid or a lot of any other kinds of civil or criminal fees or fines getting paid after the storm, that money went away. Public defender's office laid off nearly 80% of its staff. By barely a year after the storm, 11 public defenders were reportedly sharing 3,000 cases here. Joining us now is Billy Southern, an anti-death penalty lawyer, New Orleans resident, and author of the book Down in New Orleans, Reflections from a Drowned City. Also, my pal. Hi, Billy. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Nice to see you, too.
So, does that sound right to you, the way I explained the public defender situation? Is that roughly the case?
Yeah, indigent defense, like many other things in Louisiana, we were doing it the worst. We probably had a worse system than almost any other place in the country. And actually, that's one of the bright points is that post Katrina, we look around and we look for reasons for optimism, and the Orleans Parish Public Defender's Office is one of them. It's been transformed. Great young lawyers are coming in and working these cases and realizing people's Sixth Amendment rights. So that's one bright spot here.
In terms of your own work representing prisoners, people who've already been convicted, who are challenging their cases, or people who are facing very serious charges, what happened to people who were already in the criminal justice system during Katrina?
It was a nightmare. People were left to die, and there's at this point we have scores of stories of people who were left in the Orleans Parish Prison in rising water, in cells that they needed to break out of so they didn't drown in them, and then they were transported willy-nilly, if they did manage to get out, on buses across the country where they were kept in pens and where they were essentially held without any prospect of release for months on end, because no one really bothered to figure out who they were, except for a small group of lawyers who began to work hard to try to identify people. But on top of the nightmare that all of us lived in post-Katrina, these people had it far, far worse. And I think it's important to remember that in our prison here, or our jail, the vast majority of people are in for very, very minor things like traffic tickets, trespassing on golf courses, that kind of thing. So, if you end up getting pulled over by the cops, there's a good chance you're going to get arrested, even if it's for something trivial. So the people who we're talking about, we're not talking about hardened criminals. We're talking about the majority of folks, just regular old people who had the misfortune of getting stopped by the police that day.
Well, there's been a lot of national attention, particularly recently, about Danziger Bridge shooting and some other things. We talked about one of those post-Katrina incidents in the previous segment in terms of what happened on Religious Street. There's national attention now to the fact that the New Orleans Police Department has serious problems. But as a resident here, can you say how the problems in the New Orleans Police Department affect what daily life is like here?
Well, I think also it's important to note that this post-Katrina real crisis with the police, where numerous civilians were murdered, it appears, is not, again, a Katrina problem. It's a New Orleans problem that was magnified and exposed by Hurricane Katrina. But there's a real public confidence crisis with the New Orleans police. We have a situation where people are concerned about reporting crimes to begin with, but then because we have police officers who are frequently hostile to the communities they're supposed to serve, it only makes people more reluctant to report crimes. So there's a real relationship in my mind between the staggering crime rate here and the real collapse of public confidence in the police department, a collapse of public confidence that seems entirely warranted.
But it is a problem that's being taken seriously.
It's being taken seriously in part because of the dogged efforts of independent journalists coming in here, people like A.C. Thompson at The Nation exposing post-Katrina murders which police conspired to cover up. So the feds have responded to that, and and that's a terrific thing. But it's disconcerting to me that there are no Serpicos in this story. Yeah. There's no situation where the district attorney's office decided, oh, we're going to go in and we're going to clean up our own city. It really required people coming in from outside to do this. And while that's welcome, I think it's also, to some extent, some cause for concern.
Are you hopeful? I mean, one of the things that you keep bringing the conversation back to, which I think sounds like a sign of hope, and I might be wrong, is the people who've been trying to make it better, whether it was lawyers doggedly going after these people who are lost inside the criminal justice system in horrible circumstances, whether it is crusading journalists who are not letting issues go even when everybody else wants to forget them, the activists who have fought to make stuff work in very broken systems. Does that work? The fact that that has happened overall make you feel hopeful about staying here and living here? Yeah,
definitely. In addition to those people, anyone who gutted their house, anyone who helped someone else gut their house, anyone who keeps on calling the phone to try to get the street light fixed, at this point, 5 years out, I think all these people are fighting for American democracy, whether you're trying to get your kid into a good school or joining the PTA or what. But the main thing that I see here in New Orleans is that all of these problems, whether it's the crime problem, the housing problem, the schooling problem, this is the razor's edge of problems that exist everywhere in America. And to the extent that they remain unresolved in New Orleans, I think that there's very little hope that they're going to be resolved elsewhere. So while New Orleans does represent this magnification of these problems, most places don't have 60 murders per 100,000 residents. New York, for instance, has 6. Yeah. But to the extent that New Orleans does, and that we're unable to reform those issues, that we're unable to make progress on those points, my feeling is that Americans should be concerned, not just for New Orleans, but if we're unable to do this here, then it's going to come to a neighborhood near them.
That's right. Remember New Orleans, part of America?
Yeah.
Complicated.
It's a good part of America.
It's exactly right. Billy Southern, thank you so much, man. It's good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
Down in New Orleans, Reflections from a Drowned City is Billy Southern's book. A lot of incredible things happened that allowed the city of New Orleans to survive the floods after Hurricane Katrina. Organic, homegrown things that you probably couldn't have organized, let alone predicted before the storm. One example, the spontaneous conversion of one of the biggest commercial radio stations in town into a round-the-clock community center, like an audio beacon for a drowning city. The story of WWL and the man who took the mic, coming up live from New Orleans. We are live from Algiers Point in New Orleans. Don't spurse me, bro. We'll be right back.